Oh, thanks man, appreciate the help. So, this is the Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra. Now, this really feels fitting with the name itself, especially because of that camera housing right there. It's a mental camera house. But we're gonna discuss the phone a little bit. These are my first impressions, of course, not a review, and we're gonna just see what I think so far. I've been using it for a few days, but these kind of unboxings, of course, take a little bit longer than your normal average stop shop or anything like that. But let's discuss the phone and my experience so far, because so far I kind of like it. It's different, and I really like how we are going with very large camera sensor. We're going to discuss that a little bit as well. Again, very limited knowledge so far about how it performs because I just had it for a few days. So let's just discuss what I have so far to say about the Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra. Okay, fancy stuff out of the way. Let's just see what more, of course, you get inside of the box. Now, of course, you get your whole setup here. You have your pin tool, of course, for the SIM ejection. But also something that I really like to see is, of course, you get a protection case. Now, this protection case also lifts up with the camera housing itself. So it makes it, of course, that it is protected on the sides of the camera housing as well. And this slightly goes above, but very so slightly, above the frame itself of the camera housing. Of course, you have your user guide and your warranty, but also your 67 watt charging inside of the box itself. This is something that I really like, because a lot of companies at the moment are saying, well, we're gonna remove that. No, Xiaomi is like, you know what, you're gonna get that 67 watt inside of the box, with of course your USB. For those who are wondering, this is USB-A to USB-C, so of course this is the way this charges. Some have it where it is USB-C to USB-C like Sony, but this one is USB-A to USB-C. Fine for me, really don't have an issue with it. And of course you get your cable with it as well. Now let's look a little bit more at the phone itself, because that's what we are here for. Now, as stated, this is the Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra. I like that I have it in white, so thank you very much Xiaomi for that, because if you don't get it in white, it's really hard to film, especially with the ceramic back. It just looks far better in white, for my opinion. I like black in color, but just this kind of way just looks better for me. Now, of course, something that you straight away will notice in terms of design is, of course, that huge camera housing that comes with two large sensors and, of course, your periscope, but also a separate display right there. This is basically the display from the Mi Watch Band 5, if I'm correct out of my head. So that's actually a small display that also works with your camera. However, there are some limitations to it. We'll discuss that in a full review. I haven't used it long enough to give you a full impression, by the way. But we'll give a full review, of course, about this device later on. And if for those who are wondering, I am not using 12.5 at the moment. I wish, because that has some camera updates. So this is, of course, with the 12.0 and then some numbers behind it. So I'm really curious to see what comes after the update. But my first impressions rely on what I currently have. So that is, of course, this software version and not the newer one. That should improve the camera experience, but I don't have that yet, but we'll discuss that when I do get it. Now, in terms of camera, like stated, it comes with a huge sensor. The main sensor is a 1/1.13 inch sensor size out of my head, which is the largest till date, if I'm correct. It's really large for a phone. However, what I would say is that with these kind of phones, dual aperture would be so good to have. I know Samsung did it in their older phones, like the S9 for instance, that they had that dual aperture. What it allows is basically less light to be captured, but also the depth of field would be less shallow. With, of course, this Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra, the depth of field is quite shallow because of that large sensor, compared to some other phones out there as well. And that makes it that sometimes when you try to shoot something really close and it's a bit larger, of course, it just looks like the depth of field is really shallow. With that being said, depth of field really looks natural so far with I experienced. It does really look good. So far what I can say in terms of images, it goes for the more natural approach compared to something like Samsung does. And I prefer that, because what Samsung does, it looks over-processed for me. The saturation doesn't look right as well, with greens having too much green punch to it, too much saturation. shadows being removed and whatnot. This one seems to go for the more natural approach, and I really prefer that over something that Samsung does. This is why I'm not a huge fan of the S21 Ultra, but we'll discuss that in the full review. Of course, you do have a periscope that does 120 times. Honestly, 120 times is pretty useless. It doesn't look good, but it's a feature, I guess. So for those who want to brag, you can zoom in more with this one compared to the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra. But again, really doesn't matter to me. 10 times it looks fine, but as stated, with the new software version, it should improve a lot. But as stated, this is what I'm using right now, so I'm judging it on what I have so far. Periscope seems to be fine at the moment, but we'll discuss that in a full review as well. In terms of display, it really is a beautiful display. Of course, really bright. But if I have to say something, is that the corners themselves look a bit odd for me. It doesn't follow the frame, of course, of the frame itself. So it doesn't curve with the frame. It goes more curved in. If that makes sense, but you can see the difference at the corners. It really looks odd for me, and I'm not a big fan of that. But it is what it is. That's what you get with the phone itself. But in terms of display, it is beautiful. Of course, you do have a curved display itself, so do keep that in mind if you're not a fan of that. Of course, this has that curved display. Almost made it drop. Also, having the camera centered does make it that if you are laying it flat, you don't have this wobble going on. Let's remove that. If you, for instance, compare that with the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra, and you of course place that flat, you see, you have that wobble. Centered camera doesn't have that. It doesn't matter that then the camera housing is that big, especially if you do get a large sensor in return. I prefer to have a large sensor and then, of course, having a camera hump like this. Overall, so far, it seems like a really solid device. Of course, I haven't used it long enough where I can give you an opinion about it just yet. We'll have to use it longer. And then, of course, I will make a full review about this device. And of course, I will keep you updated along the way, seeing how it performs after the 12.5 MIUI version as well. But for now, we just have this and we're gonna experience how it performs as of now. Either way, this was, of course, my first impression and unboxing of the Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra. Let me know what you think about the device itself. And of course, what your questions are about the device itself. Let me know in the comments below. And of course, liking it and all that stuff really does help with the video itself. It performs better if you do comment on my video. If you do like it, YouTube just likes that, the algorithm stuff. I'm not a fan of it. I should probably make some thumbnails with my face and the hand in front of it. Nah, not gonna do that. But anyway, this is of course my first impression video and not a full review. Stay tuned for that one. And of course, talk to you guys in the next.